Hey everyone, I'm back. I know I was going to take a break from Caped Flicks, and I planned on doing so. I was going to do a fun little essay on Godzilla vs. Kong, which I still may do. But as I was scrolling through HBO Max, I saw the Snyder Cut, which I hadn't seen yet. Honestly, the 4-hour runtime was a little bit intimidating to start, but I finally decided to do it. So I watched it, and holy shit, I loved it. Now, I know I was previously critical of Snyder's vision when it came to Batman and his DC films. I previously said he didn't know what he was doing creating a broken Batman without showing us how he became broken. Well, then I watched the Snyder Cut, and I had my ass handed to me. The Snyder Cut is superior, and I sincerely apologize for what I said about him in my previous Batman video. I'll talk more about Batman later, but there are some things I want to talk about first. So just like the Snyder Cut, I'll be splitting this essay into parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you haven't seen the Snyder Cut yet, I recommend you do so because there will be spoilers. Before this video begins, I want to talk to you about the Patreon. I know it's a little early in the video to be talking about this, but I don't want to interrupt the 6-part extravaganza. For only $3 per month, you can get short movie reviews, early access to essays, and your name in the credits. If you just want your name in the credits, there's a $1 tier for that too. I also may be adding a new tier that gives access to a podcast where we talk about movies, shows, and just life in general, but we'll see. Also, go follow my Twitter at KYD Films. Alright, thanks for sitting through that, now let's begin. The Snyder Cut, Warner Brothers' child, is shoved to the side in favor of a disgusting, putrid, ugly child known as the theatrical cut of Justice League, aka Justice League, aka a pile of bullshit. Once this monstrosity came out, everyone was outraged. They knew that Zack Snyder was more talented than whatever got released in theaters, and they weren't going to stand for it. And then we learned of Whedon's terrible mistreatment of the cast, especially Gal Gadot and Ray Fisher. And here's the thing, Whedon has made a good superhero movie. He's handled characters well before, especially Tony Stark in the first Avengers movie. So obviously, Whedon didn't want this movie to succeed. But why would Warner Brothers alter Justice League to the point of being completely unwatchable? Did they really think Whedon's quote-unquote vision for these characters was better than Snyder's? I doubt it. Zack Snyder obviously had a creative, epic vision, and I think Warner Brothers knew that. However, at the time, theatrical, over-the-top, dramatic superhero films were less than popular. Everyone wanted a fun superhero movie, nothing more. So they hired someone to make just that. A fun superhero movie with no soul, no passion, no real story, and no love. A story with no character development, cheap comedy, and a cookie-cutter villain. When Batman v Superman didn't make as much as they were hoping for, they tried to take the Marvel route, except they forgot one thing: characters. So yeah, the fans weren't satisfied, and they took action. After years of demanding the Snyder Cut, we finally got somewhere, and now that we've received the Snyder Cut, we have even more work to do, but we'll get into that later. Anyways, the Snyder Cut is here, and I love it. And now that we've seen Zack Snyder's DC trilogy, I can really appreciate Batman v Superman, especially when watching the trilogy all together. So sincerely, thank you, Zack Snyder. Thank you for putting your heart, soul, and passion into this project. Thank you for not taking the classic superhero route. I loved Zack Snyder's Justice League. I didn't just love it, I loved it with all my heart. And I want to talk about some of the things I loved about this movie and some of the parts I didn't love. This section will be my overall review of the movie, and fair warning, this is my opinion. Let's begin with what I didn't like. As much as I wanted to like this aspect, as much as I wanted to love this character, I wasn't a fan of Wonder Woman. I liked her in Batman v Superman, and I thought she was great in her own movie, but to be honest, she just wasn't great in this one. Wonder Woman is an exposition machine in this film, and that's where she loses me. It really feels like they didn't know how to write her character at all, so they just turned her into Captain Obvious. Granted, she's way better and way more badass in this version than she is in Justice League, but she could still be written way better. It also doesn't help that Wonder Woman 84 kinda soured her for me. Now for the other character I didn't love in this story, and it's a shame because he happens to be my favorite comic book character of all time. That's right, I didn't love Batman. While Batman is supposed to be a kick-ass genius martial artist, he just feels so incredibly weak in this film. He never really does much in the battles, and it's slightly disappointing. However, I do think Batman was great in the nightmare scene, which I'll go over later. Now on to what I loved, which would be everything else. Steppenwolf, whereas in the other version was a cookie-cutter boring villain, is actually a great foil for our characters. He feels threatening, he feels like he can pack a punch, and you feel like you can understand him. You can understand that he's a disgrace to Darkseid and that he's just searching for redemption. Now, does that justify his actions? Of course not. I'm just saying that you can understand why he's doing what he's doing. Aquaman was great in this film. His character is nothing absolutely groundbreaking or touching, but he's pretty great. Jason Momoa, as always, was perfect. I do like that we see him act sympathetically towards Cyborg in this and that we see their bond grow. Darkseid was fucking awesome. An absolutely terrifying villain who I think is better than Thanos. Frankly, Thanos is great, but I've always loved Darkseid more. He feels more evil, more intimidating, and far more sinister. I love his look, I love his voice, and I love his backstory. The whole flashback scene with the war between Darkseid and Earth was astonishing. Now let's talk about Superman. This is definitely an unpopular opinion, but Henry Cavill's Superman is my favorite Superman. I absolutely love his story, I love his acting, and I love his overall feel. His story feels very similar to Disney's Hercules, which happens to be my favorite Disney film. I loved his resurrection, I love his black suit, and I love the future scene where he falls before Darkseid. Martian Manhunter was cool, but could have been used way more, and I wish we got to see Jon Stewart as Green Lantern. Now stepping away from the characters, let's talk about the story. The story feels much more like a legend of Greek mythology than a superhero film, which I love. It takes time to build its characters, the world, and the stakes. The 4-hour runtime is definitely necessary. One last thing I want to talk about. The CGI in this movie is pretty great. I know it gets a lot of flack, but I really can't tell why. Cyborg looks pretty good in most scenes, Steppenwolf and Darkseid look great, and the Flash's CGI is spectacular. Really, the only issue that I noticed were some spotty green screen scenes, but there weren't very many of them. The nightmare scene. This scene, containing my least favorite Joker and one of my least favorite Batmen, was my favorite scene between Joker and Batman in any film. It felt so real, so honest, so genuine, and so personal. We see Joker, a man driven by madness, chaos, and anarchy, living in a chaotic world. And in this world, in this chaotic mess of a world, you see more humanity in him than ever before. There are hints of an actual human being inside of a crooked shell of a man, especially when Harley Quinn is mentioned. In this scene, we get the most impactful dialogue between these characters than, in my opinion, we've ever gotten. Well, in live action anyway. Remember when I said in my last video, well, I got what I was asking for. We finally get a meaningful conversation between the Joker and Batman about what happened to Robin, and it's fantastic. Since Batman v Superman first came out, I've craved clarification on this. Under the Red Hood is my favorite Batman story, so naturally I wanted to see it happen. And while I didn't get to see it, I was satisfied with this conversation. This one conversation in which the Joker asks Batman why he sent a boy wonder to do a man's job. Not only do we get clarification and references, but let's talk about the killer dialogue. When Joker taunts Batman with the death of his adopted son, Batman brings up Harley. He brings up how she made him promise that when he kills the Joker, that he'll do it slow. It takes a lot to break the Joker, but I think that you can see by his hands shaking and how his face freezes that Batman succeeded. Now let's talk more about Batman, considering I did a whole ass video on why Batfleck is bad and why Pattinson will be good. While I don't take back any of my previously stated opinions that I think that Batman shouldn't kill, I don't mind that Batfleck does. When Batman says I will fucking kill you, it's satisfying. I think as long as we have a Batman that doesn't kill, I'm okay with seeing a Batman that does. Zack Snyder's trilogy does not feel like classic DC characters, rather a twisted alternate version of them, and I like it. So as someone who is a classic Batman loyalist, I'll say it. I would love to see Ben Affleck play Batman again. Whether it's in the Apocalypse or fighting Deathstroke, I'd love to see it. Listen, I love The Flash. He's one of my favorite DC characters. I loved the earlier seasons of the CW show, and I love his personality overall. Which is why I was so disappointed to see the absolute hack job that they did with his character in Joss Whedon's cut. Barry Allen was an idiotic, stumbling buffoon whose biggest concern was brunch. He didn't know how to fight, and he offered next to nothing to the team except terrible lines of dialogue and awful jokes. Needless to say, I hated this character. I was burnt out on The Flash, and I was not looking forward to his return in the Snyder Cut. But holy hell did Ezra Miller redeem the character. While The Flash served as comic relief, he was also a fleshed out and enjoyable character. It never felt like he was only around to get a laugh out of the audience. His scenes weren't pointless, laughably bad, or unwatchable. On the contrary, The Flash had at some of the best scenes in the film. In fact, I would go as far as to say that he holds my favorite scene in the movie. And no, I'm not talking about the Speed Force scene, even though that's also an amazing scene. My favorite scene in this movie is a simple, beautiful, yet comedic scene all at the same time, and that scene is the iris scene. This wonderfully crafted, beautifully stylized, and visually stunning scene is perhaps the best scene I have watched out of any comic book movie. The way his shoes bust open, the glass bends, and the hot dogs fly gives me chills every time. Of course, the music accompanying the scene is perfect as well. As we see this extremely tender and emotional scene with Barry taking in Iris's beauty as he saves her, we get a hint of comedy as well. It doesn't feel forced, out of place, or out of character, rather it fits the scene quite well. While Barry takes in Iris's beauty, he notices a hot dog flying next to her. Barry becomes infatuated with the hot dog and puts it in his pocket. Then we get back into the emotional scene. It's a nice break for comedy without breaking the emotional tone, you know? A truly amazing scene for a truly astonishing character. Of course, I can't not mention the Speed Force scene, a visually breathtaking sequence in which Barry Allen breaks his rule, turns back time, and saves the planet. I've watched it more times than I can count and I can't get enough of it. Though I absolutely love the Flash in this movie, he wasn't my favorite character, but my favorite is one who was absolutely disgraced in the Whedon cut. One who had a spectacular story, but was reduced to nothing. Victor Stone, aka Cyborg, is my favorite character. You probably noticed that, along with the Flash, I didn't mention Cyborg earlier. That's because I wanted to talk about him in his own section. Cyborg has always been one of my favorite characters. I loved him in the animated Teen Titans show, and I loved him in Doom Patrol. But when I saw the Whedon cut, I was extremely disappointed. I didn't think his character was annoying or anything, I just thought he was empty. I kept asking the question, why would they do that? Why would they fuck up a character like that? And the answer is Joss Whedon. I think it's fair to say that Whedon treated Ray Fisher like absolute shit, and honestly, fuck Whedon for that. Fuck Whedon for treating the entire cast like shit, especially Ray Fisher and Gal Gadot. So yeah, Cyborg was terrible in the Whedon cut, no question about it, no character, it's just bland dialogue. But Zack Snyder fixed that. Zack Snyder cares about Cyborg. In the Snyder cut, Cyborg is the living, beating heart of the movie. He, besides the Flash, holds the best, most emotional, and most impactful scenes in this film. His arc went from 0 in the Whedon cut to 100 in this version, and I love it. Now let's talk about his arc. Victor Stone was an athlete who felt neglected by his father. One night, Victor has an argument with his mother about his father. This argument causes a car crash, killing his mother and leaving him without limbs. Victor's dad uses the mother box to turn Victor into a cyborg. Now that Victor is a cyborg, he feels completely broken and alone, especially now that his mother's gone. Throughout the movie, Victor struggles with accepting himself for who he is and forgiving his father. But by the end, Victor comes to the realization that he is not broken and that he is not alone. We see him reject the old Victor and accept the new cyborg. We see that Victor is able to move on. This sends out a beautiful message to anyone feeling rejected, isolated, different, broken, and alone. It sends the message that there are always people out there for you. You just need to find them. And no matter what happens, we can move on and become stronger from it. I think this message goes perfectly with the dedication to Autumn, Zack Snyder's late daughter who tragically committed suicide. This is Snyder telling the audience that they are not alone and that things can get better. Cyborg was not only a blast to watch, but his journey and battle with himself was astonishing. His arc was truly inspirational, and I don't think it could have been handled better. Well done, Zack. Well done. Well, here we are. The Snyder Cut has been released, we've all watched it, and I loved it. I loved it more than possibly any other superhero movie. Sure, I didn't love Batman in it, but I got to experience a fully fleshed out cyborg. Point is, it would have been absolutely criminal to not release this film. Which brings me to my next point. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to restore the Snyderverse. I know we have some promising films coming out like James Gunn's Suicide Squad, but this needs to happen. We've been teased with glory and we need to see the rest. Zack Snyder has plans for 2 other Justice Leagues, and it would be an absolute tragedy to not see his vision pan out completely. It would be a damn shame to not see the godlike battle between the League and Darkseid. It would be some real bullshit to not see the Nightmare World in its entirety. Zack Snyder, while he isn't a perfect director, while he isn't a perfect filmmaker, has a vision. He has a creative, epic, mythological vision, and we need to see it entirely. One last thing, I want to touch more on my previous Batman video. I implied that Zack Snyder isn't the brightest man for deconstructing a hero that he never bothered to construct. But now that we've seen this, I take it back. Zack tore down a hero so that he could rebuild him, and while I'm not a fan of Batfleck, I can completely respect Zack Snyder's vision of Batman, even if it means he kills. I would love to see Snyder do more with this character, and I would love to see Affleck do more with this character. If Ben Affleck is up to it, of course. I know that he struggled quite a bit while playing this role, and I'd hate for him to struggle again. So, I'd like to see him return, but only if he's up to it. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, Zack. Thank you for creating a truly enjoyable and grand film.